The door slammed open so hard it cracked against the wall. 3 FBI agents rushed in, badges out, voices sharp enough to cut glass. And there he was. The man who had smiled his way into my daughter's life, who had whispered sweet nothings while stealing everything that mattered. He stood frozen in the middle of the living room, a bouquet of roses still in his hand, his mouth hanging open like a fish yanked out of water. They spun him around. Cuffed him. Read him his rights while his perfect little mask crumbled right there on the carpet. And me? I was standing just outside the doorway, arms crossed, heart pounding, watching the man who tried to erase me from my own daughter's life finally get what was coming to him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. See, this didn't start with handcuffs and FBI agents. It started with a phone call. A simple, ordinary phone call on a Tuesday morning while I was trimming flowers in my front yard. One phone call that told me everything I needed to know about the man my daughter married. And everything I needed to do next. Let me take you back. It was a regular Tuesday morning in October. I was out front trimming the bougainvillea around my little Coronado bungalow, the kind of house you hold onto because it holds onto you. The Pacific air had that salty bite to it, the kind that settles your nerves. I needed that, because even before the phone rang, something in my chest felt tight. Like my body knew before my brain did. When I saw Natalie's name on the screen, I should have felt happy. My daughter was calling. But she hadn't called me in weeks. And the last few times she did, it was never really her talking. It was Marcus. His words coming out of her mouth. I picked up. Hey, sweetheart. Hi, Mom. Flat. No warmth. Like she was reading from a script. I tried to keep it light. I was just thinking about you. I figured you'd be deep in wedding planning by now. I still need to know the date so I can request time off. And then she said it. Casual. Like she was telling me she'd picked up groceries. Oh, we actually got married yesterday. Small ceremony up in Santa Barbara. Just the people who really matter. Just the people who really matter. Let that satisfying sentence sit with you for a second. Because it sat on my chest like a cinder block. I raised that girl alone. After her father Frank passed, I worked doubles at the hospital for years. 15-hour shifts, back to back, so she could go to a good school, wear clean clothes, never once feel like she was less than. Every birthday. Every broken heart. Every flu season. It was me. Only me. And now I didn't make the list of people who really matter. I swallowed hard and forced myself to speak. Well. Congratulations, honey. Thanks, she said, and her voice got lighter. Almost chipper. Like a customer service rep about to pitch an upsell. So, Daniel and I were actually hoping you could do us a favor. Could you send us the keys to the cottage? Marcus has always wanted to see Coronado in the fall. It'd be perfect for our honeymoon. There it was. The real reason for the call. Not to share her joy. Not to say, Mom, I wish you were there. Not even to send me a single photo. She called because she wanted my house. The Coronado cottage. The one I bought with the last of Frank's life insurance money 21 years ago. The place where Natalie learned to bodyboard. Where she burned her first s'more and laughed until she hiccuped. Where she stood barefoot on the deck at 13 years old, sunburnt and grinning, and said, Mom, I'm gonna get married right here someday. And now she wanted me to hand it over like a vacation rental. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Of course, sweetheart. I'll make sure you get the keys. She thanked me fast, said she had to run, and hung up. No details about the wedding. No mention of a dress or flowers or cake. Nothing. Just the ask and the click. I stood on my porch, garden shears still in my hand, staring at the ocean like it owed me answers. I wasn't just left out. I was erased. Crossed off like an old grocery list. But here's the thing about being a woman who survived loss, grief, and 30 years of night shifts. You don't crumble easy. And as the waves kept rolling in, steady and relentless, a thought rolled in with them. If Marcus thought he could charm his way into my daughter's life and walk off with the one thing she and I loved most, he had severely underestimated me. This wasn't the beginning of their honeymoon. This was the beginning of my plan. Let me take you back 2 years before that phone call. Because Marcus didn't just show up out of nowhere. He crept in. Slowly. Like mold behind a bathroom wall. By the time you notice, the damage is already done. Natalie had been through her share of bad relationships. The guy who ghosted her after 2 years. The one who couldn't hold a job. So when she called me one evening, voice full of butterflies, saying she'd met someone different, someone serious, I wanted so badly to believe her. Mom, you're going to love him. He's not like the others. I told her to bring him over. I'd make my lasagna, the one she'd been begging for since she was 9. I set the table with my grandmother's china. I wanted to give this man the best first impression of our family, because that's what mothers do. We opened the door, even when our gut whispers to keep it shut. Marcus showed up in a fitted charcoal suit, holding a bouquet of white lilies like he was auditioning for a Hallmark movie. His handshake was firm. His smile was wide. Every word out of his mouth was polished and precise. Mrs. Whitfield, it is such a privilege, he said, looking me dead in the eye. Natalie talks about you like you hung the moon. He asked about my years as a nurse. Leaned in like my stories were the most interesting things he'd ever heard. Complimented the lasagna twice. Insisted on clearing the plates. Even rolled up his sleeves and scrubbed the casserole dish without being asked. To anyone watching from the outside, this man was flawless. But I've been alive long enough to know that flawless is a red flag. What really caught my attention wasn't his charm. It was his interest in things that had nothing to do with my daughter. 3 times during that dinner, 3 separate times, he brought up my Coronado Beach cottage. So Natalie tells me you've had that cottage for over 20 years, he said, twirling pasta on his fork like it was the most casual thing in the world. Right on the beach? That must be worth a fortune by now. You ever think about selling? I smiled tightly. That cottage isn't for sale. Every memory Natalie and I built after Frank passed lives in that house. Oh, totally, he said, nodding like he understood. Family legacy. You can't put a price on that. But his eyes told a different story. They lingered a beat too long. Calculating. Like he was running numbers in his head that had nothing to do with sentiment. After dinner, he hugged me at the door and said, "You raised an incredible woman, Mrs. Whitfield. You should be proud." Those words should have warmed me. They didn't. They felt like lines from a play. Rehearsed, delivered, and hollow underneath. That night, while I was wiping down the counters, I called my sister Patricia out in Scottsdale. "Pat, something about this man doesn't sit right with me. He asked about the beach house 3 times. She laughed. "Oh, Gloria. You're doing that thing again. He's trying to show interest in the family. That's what good men do. Don't sabotage this for Natalie." I wanted to believe her. God, I really did. Because Natalie's face that night was the happiest I'd seen it in years. That girl was glowing. But as I stood at the kitchen window, watching the streetlights flicker on, I couldn't shake it. I kept thinking about Frank. My late husband. He had that same easy charm. That same gift for making you feel like the center of the universe, right up until the moment you stopped being useful. And something deep in my bones, the part of me that had survived widowhood and raised a child alone and spent decades reading people in hospital rooms, that part whispered loud and clear. This man is not what he seems. Sometimes perfection isn't a blessing. It's a mask. And the prettier the mask, the uglier what's hiding behind it. After that first dinner, Marcus moved fast. Not in the way you'd notice right away. It wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Like someone turning down the volume on a radio so slowly you don't realize the music's gone until you're sitting in dead silence. At first, Natalie still called me on her lunch breaks. Still popped by the cottage on weekends to sit on the deck and eat takeout with her feet in the sand. But week by week, those calls got shorter. Those visits got rarer. And every time I asked why, the answer was always the same. Marcus thinks we should be more intentional about our time together. He says successful couples put each other first. You get it, right, Mom? No, baby. I didn't get it. Because putting your partner first doesn't mean putting your mother in the trash. But I bit my tongue. Because I knew if I pushed, I'd lose her faster. 6 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen on a Sunday morning, half asleep, scrolling through Facebook with my coffee getting cold. And there it was. A photo of Natalie's left hand. A diamond the size of a pencil eraser. The caption said, "He asked." I said yes. Forever starts now. 60-something likes. Dozens of comments. Friends, co-workers, people I'd never met, all congratulating her. And not a single one of them asking where her mother was. Because they all assumed I already knew. I didn't. My daughter got engaged, and I found out the same way a stranger would. Scrolling through a screen with cold coffee in my hand and a crack running straight down the middle of my heart. I called her immediately. She picked up breathless, giddy, talking a mile a minute. Oh my God, Mom, I'm so sorry. It just happened last night and we were so caught up in the moment. Marcus planned this whole thing at our favorite restaurant downtown. Then we went back to his place and called his parents. It got so late and I was literally about to call you this morning, I swear. Called his parents first. Let that one land. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said what mothers say when they're breaking inside but don't want to ruin the moment. Congratulations, sweetheart. Tell me everything. And she did. She gushed about the proposal, the ring, how Marcus's mother had already started planning an engagement party at their family's country club up in Pasadena. When's the party? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Silence. Then that voice again. The careful one. The one that sounded like Marcus had already prepped her for this conversation. Mom, about that. It's really more of a thing for Marcus's side. His mother is very traditional. She's planning the whole thing. It's mostly his family and their close friends. I don't want to rock the boat this early. I felt something cold drop into my stomach. And what do you want, Natalie? I want to start things off right with his family. You understand, don't you? I understood more than she realized. I understood that my daughter was slowly being rewritten. Her words, her priorities, even the way she apologized, it all sounded like someone else. Like a script she'd memorized to keep the peace. That night, I sat on my bed staring at a framed photo on my nightstand. Natalie and me at the cottage. She was maybe 11 in the picture. Her hair was wild from the ocean wind. My arms were wrapped around her so tight you'd think I was trying to keep the tide from pulling her away. She used to look at me like I was her whole world. Now I wasn't even invited to the party. And sitting there in the quiet of my bedroom, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to fight with her. I wasn't going to beg. But I was not going to disappear either. Because a mother who has buried her husband, worked herself to the bone, and built a life out of nothing does not go quietly. Not now. Not ever. 3 months after the engagement, Natalie called me on a random Tuesday evening. I was folding towels in the hallway closet, listening to an old Fleetwood Mac record, enjoying the kind of quiet that retirement gives you. The kind of peace you earn after decades of chaos. When I picked up, her voice had that careful, walking on eggshells tone. The one she used when Marcus had already told her exactly what to say. Mom, I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to not freak out. Nothing good has ever followed that sentence in the history of motherhood. What is it, sweetheart? It's about the cottage. My hand tightened around the towel I was holding. What about it? Well, Marcus says he doesn't really feel comfortable there. He feels like it's still your space, you know? Like he's being watched or judged every time we visit. And honestly, Mom, I always figured I'd inherit it eventually anyway. So maybe it just makes sense to go ahead and sign it over now. Make it officially ours. The hallway tilted. I had to put my hand on the wall to steady myself. That cottage was not a piece of paper. It was not a line item. It was the last thing Frank left behind. I bought it with his life insurance money the year after he died, when Natalie was barely 7 and the world felt like it had caved in. That cottage was where we rebuilt ourselves. Where she took her first swim in the Pacific. Where she made s'mores and got marshmallows stuck in her hair and laughed so hard she fell off the porch step. Where she stood at 13, barefoot and sunburnt, and told me she'd get married right there someday. And now a man she'd known for barely 2 years was telling her that place was a burden. I kept my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. Natalie, that house has been in our family for over 20 years. It's not just a vacation property. It's where we survived. I know, Mom. I do. But Marcus feels like it creates this weird power dynamic. Like he can never fully relax knowing it's yours. He wants us to build something that's just ours, without any strings attached. Without any strings. Like 20 years of love and memory were strings. Like everything I had sacrificed was some kind of leash. Sweetheart, I have never once made Marcus feel unwelcome in that house. I've never asked him for anything. Her voice got smaller. Almost guilty. I know. But maybe it would just be healthier if we started fresh somewhere new. Somewhere that's just us. And right there, folding towels on a Tuesday night, I finally understood the full picture. Marcus wasn't just keeping me out of the wedding. He wasn't just pulling Natalie away from phone calls and holidays. He was dismantling us. Brick by brick. Memory by memory. He was tearing down every bridge between me and my daughter until the only voice she could hear was his. I told her I'd think about it. And when we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at that same framed photo of us on the beach. Her wild hair. My tight arms. That little girl who once looked at me like I was everything. Now she was asking me to hand over the last place on earth where that version of us still existed. And something deep inside me, something tired and bruised but absolutely unbreakable, made a decision. If Marcus wanted my cottage, he was going to learn the hard way that it came with a history he could never outrun. Before I continue, let me say something real quick. On this channel, I take true stories from real people on Reddit, Quora, and other forums. I change names, details, and add some fiction to protect privacy. But the core of every story is real. And what makes this channel different is I don't just tell you the story. I break it down psychologically so we can all learn from it. If that sounds like something you need in your life, hit that subscribe button right now because trust me, you're going to want to hear how this plays out. Thank you for subscribing. Now back to story. What Marcus did to my daughter wasn't just sneaky or selfish. It was a pattern. A playbook. And I think every single person watching this needs to understand it, because people like Marcus don't wear signs around their necks. They wear charm like a cologne, and by the time you smell the rot underneath, you're already trapped. What Marcus did has a name. It's called coercive control. And no, that's not some fancy term from a textbook. It's real simple. It means someone takes over your life not by hitting you, not by screaming, but by slowly cutting off every person and every place that makes you feel like yourself. Think about what Marcus did step by step. First, he made Natalie believe that spending time with me was a distraction from their relationship. Then he made her think that my cottage, the place where she grew up, was somehow a burden on their love. He didn't take anything by force. He rewired her thinking until she handed it over willingly. That's the trick. The victim doesn't even know they're a victim because they believe every decision was their own idea. And here's the second thing I need you to hear. What Marcus was doing with the cottage, the bank accounts, the inheritance, that's called financial predation. Again, nothing fancy. It just means someone gets close to you not because they love you but because they want what's in your name. He didn't pick Natalie because she was special to him. He picked her because she was profitable. He studied her family, found out about Frank's estate, learned about the cottage, and then played the role of a lifetime to get access to all of it. This man didn't fall in love with my daughter. He auditioned for a part. And for a while, he had all of us convinced he deserved it. After that phone call about signing over the cottage, I knew hoping for the best wasn't going to cut it anymore. Marcus wasn't going to stop. He'd already taken the wedding, the holidays, the engagement. Next it would be the house, then the inheritance, and eventually my daughter's entire sense of self. I'd watched it happen in slow motion for 2 years. I wasn't about to watch the final act. So I did what any mother does when her back's against the wall. I got quiet. And I got to work. I called a private investigator. A man named Ray Delgado. He'd been a detective with San Diego PD for 20 years before going private. Frank's brother used to work with him back in the day, and when I told Ray what was going on, he didn't hesitate. We met at a diner off Pacific Highway, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it's been sitting since the Reagan administration. I slid a photo of Marcus across the table. "I need you to find out who this man really is," I said. "Because my gut is telling me he's not who he says he is, and my gut has kept me alive for 58 years. Ray studied the photo. Nodded once. "Give me a week." 1 week later, he called me back. And the weight in his voice told me everything before he said a single word. We met in his office this time. He pushed a thick manila folder across the desk. Inside were court documents, financial records, old police reports, and 2 marriage license applications that never made it to a wedding. Marcus had been engaged twice before Natalie. The first was a woman named Jenna Collins, daughter of a man who owned a chain of steakhouses across Southern California. The second was a woman named Paige Thornton, whose family had commercial real estate up and down the coast. In both cases, the playbook was identical. He charmed them, isolated them from their families, whispered about boundaries and independence, and then quietly tried to siphon their assets. Jenna's father caught on when he discovered Marcus had racked up over $200,000 in gambling debts. Paige's brothers stepped in after they noticed suspicious withdrawals from her trust fund. Both engagements ended abruptly. Marcus vanished both times like smoke. But it was what Ray found deeper in that folder that made my blood run cold. Old newspaper clippings. Yellowed, brittle, from the late 80s. A real estate development deal gone sideways in Orange County. The names jumped off the page like ghosts. "Morrison," I whispered. "That was Marcus's grandfather?" Ray nodded. "William Morrison. He and your late husband Frank were business partners. They co-invested in a commercial shopping center project back in '87. Morrison embezzled close to $3 million from their joint accounts, drained the whole operation, then disappeared to Florida. Your husband spent years trying to recover that money. Legal fees alone nearly bankrupted him." My hands were trembling. Frank had told me about a partner who betrayed him. He'd never gone into detail. I always thought it was just another failed deal, the kind that happens in business. But this wasn't just a bad deal. This man had destroyed Frank's financial life. And the stress of those legal battles almost certainly contributed to the heart condition that eventually killed him. "And now his grandson is finishing the job," I said quietly. Ray leaned forward. "It gets worse. Marcus has been living off accounts connected to Morrison's original theft. Offshore funds. Shell companies. That money trail goes back decades, and it leads right to your late husband's stolen estate." I sat back in that cracked vinyl chair and let it all sink in. This wasn't just some smooth-talking con man who'd wandered into my daughter's life by accident. This was a predator with a family legacy of theft. And he had handpicked Natalie as his next target. Not on my watch. 3 days after Natalie called demanding the cottage keys, I sat down at my kitchen table and got to work. Marcus thought I'd fold. He thought I'd mail those keys, swallow the pain, and disappear into the background like every other mother he'd bulldozed. He thought quiet meant weak. He was dead wrong. I spent 72 hours putting together what I called my wedding gift. I laid everything out on that kitchen table like a surgeon prepping for an operation. Court documents from Marcus's 2 prior engagements, both ending in scandal. Police reports filed by Jenna Collins's father. Bank transfer records Ray traced to offshore accounts tied to William Morrison's original theft. Yellowed newspaper clippings from the 80s documenting the embezzlement that wrecked Frank's business. And copies of Frank's estate records proving Natalie was the rightful heir to money stolen before she was born. I slid everything into a leather portfolio, wrapped it in silver paper, tied it with a white satin bow, and wrote a note in my neatest handwriting. Every new husband should know his wife's family history. Congratulations on your marriage. With love, Gloria. Friday morning, I drove to their Gaslamp Quarter apartment. Set the gift outside the door. Rang the bell. Walked away. By 2:15, my phone rang. Natalie's number. But the voice on the other end was Marcus. And he was crumbling. What the hell is wrong with you, you psychotic old hag? How dare you send this garbage to our home? I set my tea down. Hello, Marcus. I see you opened your wedding gift. This is harassment. I'm calling the cops. Go ahead. Tell them your mother-in-law gave you public records and archived newspaper clippings wrapped in a bow. I'm sure they'll find it fascinating. In the background, Natalie's voice was shaking. Marcus, stop. Let me talk to her. He kept going. She's insane. She's trying to destroy us. I spoke calmly. Each word placed like a blade. I'm not destroying anything. I'm handing you the truth. Did you enjoy reading about your grandfather's embezzlement? How he bankrupted my husband and vanished? Or did you prefer the records showing you've been living off that stolen money ever since? Silence. Then something new in his voice. Something I'd never heard from him before. Fear. You're lying. I never lie, I said softly. I was a nurse for 30 years. We deal in facts. But if you don't believe me, your grandfather's old attorney in Miami remembers you well. His name is Renteria. He's expecting your call. And then, barely a whisper in the background, I heard Natalie's voice crack open like glass. Marcus. What is she talking about? I hung up. Didn't need to say another word. The seed was planted. And seeds built on truth don't stay underground for long. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I barely slept. I kept replaying that phone call in my head. Marcus's voice shifting from rage to fear like a switch being flipped. But the sound I couldn't get out of my mind was Natalie's. That whisper. That crack in her voice when she said, Marcus, what is she talking about? For the first time in 2 years, my daughter had asked the right question. Sunday morning, I was making coffee in the cottage kitchen when I heard footsteps on the porch. I looked through the screen door and there she was. Sitting on the top step, knees pulled to her chest, hair unwashed, eyes swollen and red. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She looked like a woman whose whole world had just caved in. She didn't say hello. She didn't hug me. She just looked up with hollow eyes and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I sat her down at the same kitchen table where she used to do her homework. Poured her a cup of coffee. And I laid it all out. Daniel's real history. The 2 broken engagements. The gambling debts. The offshore accounts. His grandfather's crimes against her father. The money that had been stolen from Frank's estate before Natalie even took her first breath. I told her all of it, steady and clear, the way I used to deliver hard news to families in the ICU. With honesty and with love. I expected her to argue. To defend him. To tell me I was being paranoid, the way she had for 2 years. She didn't. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder of her own. She spread printouts across the table. Emails. Dozens of them. He left his laptop open, she said, her voice raw but steady. He's been emailing a man named Derek Calloway about accessing Morrison family accounts. These emails go back 2 years, Mom. 2 years. Before he even met me. He researched us. He knew about Dad. He knew about the cottage. He knew about the estate. Meeting me was not an accident. Her voice cracked, but her jaw was set. Hard. Like something inside her had turned to steel. I called one of his ex-fiancées. Jenna. She told me everything. How he cut her off from her family. How he tried to drain her accounts. Then she connected me with the other one, Paige. Same exact story, Mom. Word for word. Like he was running the same con off a checklist. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. She pulled her hand back gently and wiped her eyes. But when she looked at me, there was no more sadness. Just fire. No. Don't apologize. I believed him over you. I shut you out when you were the only person fighting for me. But that's done now. She leaned forward. I'm going to destroy him, Mom. And I need your help. The very next morning, Natalie sat down with an estate attorney who confirmed what we already suspected. She had legal claim to millions that William Morrison had stolen from Frank's estate decades ago. But here's where it got even better. Because Marcus had been actively accessing those stolen funds through shell companies and offshore accounts, he wasn't just a liar. He was a criminal. Money laundering. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. The kind of charges that don't end with a slap on the wrist. That afternoon, Natalie and I sat across the table from Special Agent Elena Navarro at the FBI field office in downtown San Diego. She was sharp, direct, and clearly had been waiting for this moment. We've had Marcus Morrison on our radar for months, she said, folding her hands on the table. But we've been missing key evidence. What you two have brought in fills the gaps. If you're willing, we can set up a controlled operation. Natalie didn't blink. I'll do whatever it takes. Friday evening, Marcus came back to the apartment. Of course he did. He showed up with a fresh bouquet of roses and that golden retriever smile, acting like the last week had been nothing more than a little misunderstanding. Baby, I've made mistakes, he said, his voice dripping with that practiced sweetness. But we can move past this. I love you. Let's start over. What he didn't know was that 3 tiny microphones were tucked inside the living room lamps. What he didn't know was that a wire sat flat beneath Natalie's blouse, taped against her collarbone. What he didn't know was that 2 FBI agents were parked in a van 30 feet from the front door, headphones on, recording every single syllable. Natalie played her part like she'd been born for it. She softened. She nodded. She let him talk. And at exactly 9:17 p.m., Marcus leaned in close and whispered the words that sealed his fate. All I need is access to your accounts. Once that money moves, it's ours forever. We disappear, start fresh. No one can touch us. Natalie's voice was perfectly steady. So you admit you married me for the inheritance? He smiled. And you should be grateful I chose you. The front door slammed open. 3 agents moved in fast, badges out, voices like thunder. FBI. Hands where we can see them. Marcus's smile disintegrated. His mouth fell open. His eyes went wide and wild, like an animal caught in headlights. They spun him around, pressed him against the wall, and cuffed him right there in the living room of the apartment he thought he owned. And me? I was watching from just outside the door, right where Agent Navarro told me to stand. Arms crossed. Heart pounding. Watching that mask finally shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The news broke across San Diego by Monday morning. Headlines ran across the Union Tribune website. Local man arrested in multi-state fraud scheme. They kept Natalie's name out of it, but Marcus's mugshot was everywhere. That same handsome face that had charmed its way through dinner tables and engagement parties now stared out from every screen, hollow and stripped bare. The trial started 6 weeks later. Same courthouse where I'd once filed guardianship papers after Frank died. Now my daughter stood in that same building, facing the man who had tried to erase her mother from her life. She testified with a strength I hadn't seen since she was a teenager fighting for first place at a swim meet. She told the jury how Marcus isolated her. How he convinced her I was controlling, that the cottage was a chain, that her family was holding her back. She explained how every decision she thought was hers had actually been planted by him. He didn't just steal money, she said, her voice filling the courtroom. He stole my family. He stole my history. And he nearly stole the trust one had in myself. 2 other women took the stand after her. Jenna and Paige. Same story. Same playbook. Same predator. Together, they painted a picture the jury couldn't ignore. A man who had spent years perfecting a con, targeting women with family wealth, dismantling their support systems, and moving in on their assets. Marcus's defense tried to frame him as reckless, not criminal. A man who made bad choices, not calculated ones. But the evidence buried that argument. Bank records. Offshore transfers. And his own voice, recorded crystal clear on that wire, saying the words no defense attorney could spin. You should be grateful I chose you. The jury deliberated for under 3 hours. Guilty. Every single count. At sentencing, the judge didn't mince words. 12 years in federal prison. Full restitution to every victim. And the accounts Marcus had been draining for years would be redirected to their rightful heirs. For Natalie, that meant nearly $4 million. Money her father earned. Money that was stolen before she ever knew it existed. Money finally coming home. When we walked out of that courthouse, Natalie reached over and slipped her hand into mine. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. For the first time in years, my daughter was walking beside me again. That evening, we drove out to the cottage together. No agenda. No phone calls. Just us. We sat on the porch with the Pacific stretching out wide and endless in front of us, the way it always had. The way it always would. I brought out the old photo albums, the ones with sticky pages and faded prints, and we flipped through them one by one. Natalie laughed through her tears at pictures of sunburnt noses and lopsided sandcastles. At a photo of her at 7, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a hermit crab like she'd just discovered treasure. Mom, she said quietly, staring out at the water. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For believing him. For pushing you away. For treating you like you didn't matter when you were the only one who ever really fought for me. I pulled her close. You were manipulated by a professional liar. That's not your fault. What matters is you came back. You fought your way out. And you're sitting right here. She nodded slowly. Then she looked at me with that fire still burning behind her eyes. Next time I walk down an aisle, she said, it's going to be barefoot, right here on this sand. And the person standing next to me is going to love you just as much as they love me. That's non-negotiable. I smiled. The kind of smile that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere that's been holding its breath for 2 years and can finally let go. Because in the end, truth was the gift that saved my daughter. And once truth gets unwrapped, nobody can ever put it back in the box. Now listen, before you go. Everything you just heard is based on a real story shared on an online forum. I collected it with the person's consent. The names, the places, the details have all been changed. I added fiction where I needed to, because protecting people's privacy matters more than drama. But the heart of this story is 100% real. And what I try to do on this channel, every single video, is take these real experiences and break them down so we all walk away a little smarter, a little sharper, and a little more ready if someone like Marcus ever walks into our lives. So if this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this one, check out the videos right here on the channel. I promise you, every single one of them is worth your time.